The ornate grandfather clock in the opulent foyer chimed a polite yet insistent 7 o'clock. My stomach, a nervous knot of anticipation, fluttered in response. This was it, the evening my meticulously planned, carefully curated life was supposed to pivot into its next glorious phase. Julian, my handsome, charming, and ever so slightly condescending fiancé, was in the drawing room with his parents, preparing them, as he'd put it with a casual wave of his hand, for my introduction. I smoothed the skirt of my perfectly acceptable, if unremarkable, beige lace dress, a garment chosen for its utter lack of offense. My reflection in the polished marble, a demure figure with neatly pinned hair and a carefully neutral expression, seemed to perfectly embody the woman I believed Julian wanted me to be. I had been Eleanor Vale for 24 years, and for the past 3 of those, I had diligently, almost obsessively, shaped myself into the ideal partner for Julian Thorne, heir to the formidable Thorne Group. I'd learned about classical art, mastered the intricacies of corporate finance jargon, even feigned an interest in his passion for antique weaponry, all to ensure I was suitable, a word Julian's mother, Lady Thorne, frequently employed in hushed, judging tones. My own preferences, my quiet love for gardening, my fascination with forgotten languages, my surprisingly sharp wit, had long been relegated to a quiet corner of my mind, rarely venturing out. I had become a living shadow of his desires, a mirror reflecting what I thought he wanted to see, rather than the vibrant landscape of my own soul. A faint murmur of voices, Julian's distinctly audible, drew me closer to the drawing room's heavy oak doors. He had left them ajar, a small, almost imperceptible crack. Usually I respected boundaries, but tonight, a tremor of unease, a premonition I couldn't shake, compelled me forward. I paused, my ear instinctively pressing against the cold wood, telling myself it was merely to ascertain the opportune moment for my entrance. The polished wood felt cold against my cheek, a stark contrast to the burning apprehension in my chest. "She's safe, Mother." Julian's voice, usually so mellifluous, held a dismissive edge. Utterly predictable. No scandals, no wild whims, perfect for maintaining the family's image. But honestly, she's a bit dull. The word struck me not like a blow, but like a chilling drizzle seeping into my very bones. Dull. Not kind, not intelligent, not even loyal, but dull. A wave of profound humiliation washed over me, so potent it made my ears ring. My vision blurred slightly, and the carefully constructed facade I presented to the world threatened to crack. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, a dull ache where my heart had once held hopeful expectations, now twisted into a knot of bitter disappointment. The meticulously ironed dress, the carefully chosen hairstyle, the countless hours spent studying their family history, all felt utterly meaningless in the face of that singular, devastating word. Lady Thorne's crisp, aristocratic voice followed. "Julian, dear, dull is often synonymous with dependable. While I agree she lacks a certain vivacity, she's from a good family, if somewhat obscure, and her demeanor is impeccable. We need stability, not a fluggertigibet." End quote. Her words were a chilling confirmation, painting me as a necessary, albeit unexciting, fixture in their grand scheme. Lord Thorne chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "Indeed, son. Think of her as a sturdy, well-made piece of furniture. Not flashy, but reliable. You can always acquire more stimulating company on the side, once the marriage is secured." His casual suggestion of infidelity, delivered with such an air of casual entitlement, was the final shard of glass in my already shattered composure. It wasn't just Julian's dismissal, but his parents' active complicity in viewing me as a mere utility, a convenience to be tolerated. The world tilted. My fiancé, my fiancé, was discussing me as if I were an inanimate object, a means to an end, and his father advocating for infidelity. The blood drained from my face, leaving me feeling cold and hollow. Dull. It echoed in the cavern of my mind, a damning verdict, a branding iron on my very soul. The elegant foyer, moments before a symbol of my impending success, now felt like a gilded cage. Despite the crushing humiliation, despite the sudden, sickening clarity of their true opinions, I still walked into that room later, smiling faintly, playing the part of the demure, agreeable fiancé. My limbs felt heavy, each step an act of immense willpower. I endured the polite yet unmistakably condescending scrutiny of Lord and Lady Thorne. Their eyes, once merely assessing, now felt like magnified lenses, dissecting every flaw, every lack of vivacity. I listened to Julian elaborate on my virtues, carefully omitting the word dull. But his tone still carried that faint, patronizing air, a casual disregard that was more painful than open contempt. I swallowed the bitter pill of reality, forcing myself to believe that perhaps safe and dependable was enough, that true affection would grow, that his casual cruelty was merely a facet of his ambition, a hurdle I could overcome with enough effort. I was a puppet, dancing on the strings of their expectations, even as the strings began to fray. I continued to try. I redoubled my efforts, reading more, attending more social functions, attempting to inject a vivacity I didn't truly possess. I even tried to subtly adjust my wardrobe, hoping a brighter shade, a bolder cut, might catch his eye, might finally make me less dull. But it was all for naught. Julian remained aloof, his compliments perfunctory, his gaze often drifting past me, as if searching for something, someone, more interesting. Each unreturned glance, each strained conversation, chipped away at the fragile hope I clung to. Then Camille arrived, Julian's cousin, a whirlwind of vibrant colors and audacious laughter, fresh from her studies abroad. She was everything I was not, everything Julian's parents seemed to subtly imply I lacked. Camille wore shocking pinks and emerald greens, spoke her mind with blunt honesty, and laughed with a carefree abandon that grated on my nerves even as I envied it. She was witty, daring, and utterly unconcerned with convention, a dazzling comet streaking across the drab sky of my existence. Julian was captivated. I watched, a silent observer, as his eyes, once so blandly approving of me, lit up with genuine interest when Camille spoke. Their conversations sparkled with an energy I could never replicate, their shared history and inherent compatibility forming a bond I couldn't penetrate. It was a slow, agonizing unraveling, watching my carefully constructed future dissolve before my eyes. Peace, but agonizing peace. My carefully nurtured garden of hope withered under the harsh glare of his obvious infatuation. He left me, of course. Not with a grand declaration, but with a series of vague excuses, a gradual withdrawal of affection, culminating in a curt phone call where he stated, "It's just not working, Eleanor. We're too different. I need passion." Days later, I saw him with Camille, their hands intertwined, their laughter echoing through a cafe, a public display of the very passion he had claimed to seek. My heart, already shattered, splintered further. I had given everything, suppressed everything, for a man who found me dull, and then discarded me for the vibrant woman who was his own cousin. The humiliation was absolute, the pain a physical ache that consumed me, leaving me hollowed out and adrift. My first life ended not long after, in a haze of quiet despair and profound disappointment. It wasn't a dramatic exit, merely a gentle fading, a slow surrender to the overwhelming weight of unfulfilled expectations and shattered dreams. I never truly lived for myself, always for the approval of others, always seeking to fit into a mold that was never truly my own. My existence had been a performance, and the curtain had fallen on an empty stage. Then there was darkness, a silent void, a boundless, suffocating blackness where time held no meaning, and my own existence felt like a distant, flickering ember. I drifted, a consciousness without form, without purpose, suspended in an eternal emptiness. It was neither peaceful nor terrifying, simply nothingness. A complete absence of sensation or thought, a profound blank slate. This void stretched on, seemingly for an eternity, yet simultaneously for no time at all. My previous life, with all its joys and heartbreaks, faded to a distant echo, a whisper on the edge of awareness. And then, a jolt. The world rushed back in a cacophony of sound and light. The scent of familiar lavender and old books filled my nose, comforting yet startling. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a familiar tableau. My younger self, perhaps 17 years old, stared back at me from the antique mirror, her eyes wide with startled disbelief, a youthful innocence still untouched by the harsh realities I remembered. My hand instinctively went to my chest, a phantom echo of the pain, the humiliation, that had consumed me in my previous life, but it wasn't there. Instead, there was a strange lightness, a sense of boundless possibility, like shedding a heavy cloak. The past, Julian, his parents, Camille. It was all a vivid memory, a detailed blueprint of a life I had already lived, a future I had already endured. I was reborn before the engagement, before the meticulous efforts to make myself palatable, before the crushing humiliation. I was 17 again, untouched by the insidious influence of Julian Thorne, given a blank canvas for a life that was truly my own. A quiet, almost wicked smile spread across my face. This time, things would be different. This time, I wouldn't be dull. This time, I wouldn't try to please him. I would simply let him be Julian, and let Camille be Camille. And I, Eleanor Vale, would finally be herself. The thought sparked a warmth in my chest, a nascent flame of self-determination. The memory of his words, safe but dull, played like a broken record in my mind, but this time they ignited not humiliation, but a cold resolve, a steeling of my will. I had spent years trying to be what he wanted, suppressing my true self until I barely recognized her. No more. This time, I would embrace every quirky interest, every sharp opinion, every vibrant color I had once deemed unsuitable. My authentic self, long imprisoned, yearned for liberation. The first test came quickly. Julian, still only a distant acquaintance through family circles, began to make overtures. He was charming, of course, with his carefully practiced smile and polite inquiries about my well-being, the same practiced moves I remembered so vividly. In my previous life, I would have clung to every word, dissecting them for hidden meaning, desperate to please, to be chosen. This time, I merely offered polite, non-committal responses, my gaze distant, my thoughts elsewhere. I found myself actually bored by his superficial conversation, a stark contrast to my past desperation for his attention. His words, once intoxicating, now held the hollow ring of insincerity. He invited me to tea, a formal affair at a high-end patisserie, the kind of place where hushed whispers and clinking teacups were the loudest sounds, a veritable stage for societal performances. In my previous life, I would have spent hours choosing the perfect outfit, memorizing polite conversation starters, rehearsing my every gesture. This time, I wore a dress of rich emerald green, a color I loved but had always avoided for being too bold for his refined tastes. My hair was pulled back simply, adored with a single, delicate silver pin, rather than the elaborate styles I used to favor. I arrived precisely on time. No nervous early arrival, no hurried apologies, just a quiet confidence. Julian, ever observant, raised an eyebrow at my dress. "Green, Eleanor? Rather striking, isn't it?" His tone held a hint of veiled disapproval, a subtle attempt to assert control, to pull me back into his preferred narrative. I met his gaze, a faint smile playing on my lips. "I rather like it, Julian. It reminds me of lush forests and hidden glades." My voice was calm, devoid of defensive undertones. He looked momentarily taken aback, a flicker of something akin to confusion crossing his handsome features. The previous Eleanor would have immediately backtracked, apologized, explained her choice, desperate to regain his approval. This Eleanor simply took a sip of her tea, enjoying the delicate floral notes, letting the silence hang. The conversation that followed was, for me, oddly liberating. I spoke of my burgeoning interest in rare botanical specimens, of a historical fiction novel I was devouring, of the surprising intricacies of ancient tapestry weaving. Topics that, in my past life, I would have deemed too niche or uninteresting for his sophisticated palate. Julian listened, his politeness strained, his usual smooth conversational flow disrupted. He tried, several times, to steer the conversation back to society gossip or the latest market trends, but I gently, almost imperceptibly, resisted, firmly guiding the narrative back to my own interests. The dynamic had shifted, subtly but irrevocably. He left the tea visibly discomfited, a faint frown marring his otherwise perfect features. He was used to commanding attention, to being the center of every conversation. My quiet independence was unsettling to him. I, on the other hand, felt a lightness, a small, triumphant flutter in my chest. It was exhilarating, this freedom, this unburdening of expectation. The path to my true self, once obscured, now lay clear before me. Over the next few months, I continued to subtly, yet definitively, diverge from the path I had once walked. I took up sketching, something I'd always wanted to do but had dismissed as unproductive for a future socialite. I joined a local historical society, indulging my love for forgotten lore, immersing myself in dusty archives and ancient stories. I even started taking fencing lessons, much to my family's mild bewilderment, the physical discipline a surprising release. My social engagements became less about networking and more about genuine connection, seeking out individuals who shared my burgeoning interests, rather than those who simply benefited my suitability. Julian. I was building a life around my own passions, not around a man's approval. Julian, persistent as ever, continued his pursuit, perhaps intrigued by my unexpected transformation. He seemed almost challenged by my newfound nonchalance, my quiet refusal to conform to his expectations. He sent flowers, invitations to exclusive events, but I responded with a measured politeness, accepting only those that genuinely interested me, and politely declining the rest. My refusals were never rude, merely firm, leaving no room for argument. I watched him from a distance, noting the faint frustration that occasionally creased his brow. He was used to being pursued, to having women fall over themselves for his attention. My indifference, carefully cultivated, was a novel and, I suspected, irritating experience for him. Then, Bic Analyst arrived. Julian's cousin, Camille, returned from her extended stay abroad. In my past life, her arrival had been the beginning of my end, a harbinger of heartbreak. This time, I observed it with a detached, almost scientific curiosity, like watching a play whose ending I already knew. Camille was just as I remembered her. Vibrant, audacious, a whirlwind of unapologetic energy. She wore a bright crimson dress to her welcome home party, a color that screamed for attention, and her laughter, loud and unrestrained, immediately drew every eye, a stark contrast to the polite murmurs of the elite. Julian, predictably, was drawn to her like a moth to a flame. I watched, a quiet smile playing on my lips, as his eyes, once so blandly approving of my beige existence, now sparkled with genuine, undeniable interest as Camille regaled the guests with scandalous tales from her travels. The gravitational pull between them was palpable, undeniable. I, meanwhile, engaged in a fascinating conversation with a renowned botanist about the resilience of desert flora, completely oblivious, or so I appeared, to the growing magnetic pull between Julian and Camille. It was a delicious irony, a role reversal that brought a deep, satisfying sense of vindication. I was no longer the desperate, striving figure on the periphery. Anxiously observing their dance, I was Eleanor Vale, engaged in her own world, unconcerned with the unfolding drama, a serene observer of a fate I had carefully, deliberately orchestrated. Julian, perhaps still trying to exert control, or simply accustomed to my unwavering attention, approached me later that evening, a faint frown marring his perfect features. "Eleanor, you seem rather preoccupied tonight. Are you quite well?" His voice held a hint of possessiveness, a lingering expectation of my focus being solely on him. I met his gaze, my smile serene. "Perfectly, Julian. I was just discussing the fascinating adaptation mechanisms of succulents. Did you know some can store water for years?" I answered, my tone pleasant, but my words subtly nudged the conversation away from him. He looked utterly bewildered, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. "Ah, yes. Fascinating. But perhaps you should mingle more. Camille, for instance, is quite the conversationalist." He offered, clearly trying to steer me towards his preferred topics, perhaps even towards Camille, hoping I would somehow facilitate his flirtation. I merely inclined my head, a polite, almost imperceptible shrug. Indeed, she seems to be quite adept at captivating an audience. My gaze drifted pointedly towards Camille, who was currently holding court, Julian hovering at her side with an expression of open admiration, a clear picture of his current fascination. He followed my gaze, a faint flush creeping up his neck. The unspoken truth hung in the air. He was interested in Camille, and I, the dull fiancé-to-be, was not going to stand in his way. The thought brought a strange sense of liberation. The path was clear. I had set the stage, and now I could simply watch the inevitable unfold. Over the following weeks, Julian's pursuit of Camille became increasingly obvious, a poorly concealed flirtation that was the talk of their social circles. In my past life, this would have been a source of agonizing pain, a public humiliation that would have devoured me whole. This time, I merely observed, occasionally offering a subtle, knowing glance towards Camille, who, despite her outward disdain for convention, seemed to relish Julian's attention, soaking it in like a thirsty flower. Their reckless disregard for decorum became a societal spectacle, whispered about in hushed tones over expensive wines. I, on the other hand, found myself increasingly drawn to the orbit of Lord Alaric Vance, Julian's boss and the formidable CEO of the Thorn Group. Alaric was everything Julian pretended to be, and more. He possessed a sharp, incisive mind, eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and a quiet charisma that drew respect rather than mere admiration. He was older than Julian, perhaps in his late 30s, with an aura of understated power and a surprisingly dry wit that often caught me off guard and made me genuinely laugh. Our paths began to cross more frequently, not through my design, but through his. Alaric, seemingly intrigued by my newfound independence, sought me out at social events. He didn't ask me about my suitability or my family's obscure connections. He asked about my thoughts, my opinions, my genuine interests. He listened intently when I spoke of historical architecture, offering insightful observations that revealed a surprising depth of knowledge. He even encouraged my sketching, commissioning a small, intricate piece of a rare botanical specimen for his office, a gesture that spoke volumes about his appreciation for my true self. One evening at a charity gala, I found myself in a quiet corner with Alaric, discussing the subtle nuances of a particular Baroque painting, lost in a stimulating conversation that felt both effortless and profound. Julian and Camille were, predictably, holding court nearby, their laughter a little too loud, their touches a little too lingering, a theatrical display for anyone to witness. Alaric, his gaze sharp and discerning, followed my gaze towards the pair. Julian seems quite smitten with his cousin. His voice was low, devoid of judgment, merely an astute observation. I merely offered a faint smile. Indeed, familial bonds can be remarkably strong, can't they? My tone was light, betraying nothing. Alaric's lips curved into a slight, knowing smile. Sometimes, the strongest bonds are the ones we least expect. Or perhaps, the ones we simply choose not to acknowledge. His eyes met mine, a flicker of something profound passing between us, a shared understanding that transcended the superficial chatter of the gala, a silent acknowledgement of the deeper currents at play. The unspoken question hung in the air. Was I truly interested in Julian? Was I oblivious to his blatant pursuit of Camille? The old Eleanor would have stammered, denied, perhaps even feigned ignorance, desperate to maintain appearances. This Eleanor simply held his gaze, a quiet confidence radiating from her, an open invitation to a new path. A few days later, an invitation arrived. Not from Julian, but from Alaric. A private dinner, just the two of us, at his secluded city residence. My heart, which I had believed hardened against romantic overtures, fluttered with a new, unfamiliar excitement. This was different. This wasn't about pleasing, about fitting a mold, about being suitable. This was about genuine interest, about being seen for who I was, not who I was supposed to be. It was the thrill of the unknown, unburdened by past pain. The dinner was everything I hadn't known I wanted. Alaric was a captivating conversationalist, his intellect sharp, his insights profound. He spoke of his work, of his travels, of his quiet passion for classical literature, subjects that truly engaged my mind. He encouraged me to speak, listening with genuine interest, often asking follow-up questions that demonstrated his engagement, his desire to truly understand my thoughts. There was no pretense, no judgment, just an authentic connection that felt remarkably refreshing after years of Julian's superficiality and veiled disdain. With Alaric, I felt truly heard. He even spoke, subtly, about Julian. Julian is ambitious, he noted, swirling the wine in his glass. And he has a particular vision for the Thorn Group, a more traditional one. His gaze was piercing, assessing. Do you share that vision, Eleanor? In my past life, I would have immediately said yes, eager to align myself with his world, to secure my position. This time, I paused, considering my words carefully, my own convictions guiding my response. I believe in progress, Lord Vance, and true innovation often requires challenging tradition, not merely upholding it. A company that doesn't evolve stagnates. A slow smile spread across Alaric's face, a genuine, warm expression that softened the usual intensity of his gaze, a rare glimpse of his inner warmth. A very astute observation, Miss Vale. His approval, unlike Julian's, felt earned and authentic. Over the next few weeks, our connection deepened. Alaric invited me to private art exhibitions, classical concerts, and even quiet evenings in his personal library, discussing books, sharing a quiet passion for knowledge. He seemed to genuinely appreciate my mind, my quiet strength, and even my formerly suppressed quirks. He saw the real Eleanor Vale, the woman beneath the layers of enforced demureness, and he didn't find her dull. He found her captivating, a word that resonated deeply within my reborn soul. Meanwhile, the Julian-Camille drama was escalating. Their public flirtation had turned into a barely concealed affair, a scandalous whisper on the lips of society, a juicy morsel for the gossip mongers. Julian, perhaps emboldened by my apparent indifference, or simply swept up in his infatuation, made no real effort to hide it. His actions were becoming increasingly reckless, fueled by a desire for immediate gratification, heedless of the consequences. His parents, Lord and Lady Thorne, grew increasingly agitated, their faces etched with worry. They had chosen me for my dependability, for my ability to maintain the family's image, and Julian's behavior was anything but. The carefully constructed facade of the Thorne family was cracking under the weight of his indiscretions. I overheard snippets of their exasperated conversations at social events. "It's highly inappropriate, Julian. She's your cousin. The family will be a laughingstock." Lady Thorne's voice, usually so composed, was laced with thinly veiled panic, her control slipping. Lord Thorne, ever the pragmatist, was more concerned with the financial implications. "This could jeopardize the engagement, son. And with Eleanor's family connections, however minor, it would be inconvenient. A breach of contract, a public embarrassment." His concerns were purely transactional, devoid of any genuine care for my feelings. Julian, arrogant in his infatuation, merely brushed them off, his words laced with a dismissive arrogance. "Eleanor understands. She's not the dramatic type. And Camille, she just understands me." The words stung, even now, a faint echo of the past, but the pain was distant, dulled by the blossoming affection I felt for Alaric, replaced by a sense of profound vindication. The inevitable confrontation came in a formal dinner hosted by the Thornes, a meticulously planned event meant to project an image of stability and prestige. Julian, emboldened by a few too many glasses of champagne, and with Camille draped on his arm, her eyes sparkling with defiant glee, finally addressed me. "Eleanor," he began, his voice slurring slightly, the words thick with the arrogance of assumed victory. "I think we need to talk. This engagement, it's not working." He was about to publicly discard me, just as he had in my past life, but this time, the script would be different. Before he could continue, before the words, "You're boring," could spill from his lips in front of a horrified audience, Alaric Vance, who had been observing the scene with a chillingly calm expression, rose from his seat. The sudden silence in the room was deafening, every fork suspended, every whisper stilled. Every eye turned to him, the formidable CEO of the Thorne Group, his presence commanding immediate attention. He walked directly to me, his gaze firm and unwavering, radiating an aura of quiet power. He extended his hand, not to me, but to Julian, his gesture a silent assertion of dominance. "Julian," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority, cutting through the stunned silence. "I believe you owe Miss Vale an apology, and perhaps a formal dissolution of your engagement." His words were a direct challenge, delivered with surgical precision. Julian, suddenly sobered by Alaric's presence, his face paling, stammered, "Lord Vance, with all due respect, this is a private family matter." His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a desperate, panicked deference. Alaric's eyes, usually so sharp, hardened to chips of ice, holding a chilling intensity that brooked no argument. "On the contrary, Julian, when the conduct of an heir to my company threatens the reputation of that company, it ceases to be a private matter. It becomes a matter of corporate integrity, and that falls squarely under my purview." He then turned his full attention to me, his voice softening, a warmth creeping into his tone that made my heart flutter with a sensation entirely new. "Miss Vale, With Julian's regrettable conduct, it seems your future prospects have been unfairly affected." He paused, his gaze meeting mine, a silent question in their depths, an invitation to a different future. "Might I, however, propose an alternative, one that I hope would be far more stimulating?" He then did the unthinkable. He knelt, right there, in front of Julian, his horrified parents, and the entire high society gathering. The collective gasp that swept through the room was almost a physical entity. He pulled a velvet box from his inner jacket pocket, revealing a ring with a single magnificent sapphire, a deep celestial blue that seemed to hold the very essence of the night sky, its brilliance mocking the drabness of my castle. Past. "Eleanor Vale," Alaric Vance said, his voice clear and resonant, filling the shocked silence, reverberating with sincerity. "I have come to admire your intellect, your strength of character, and your quiet grace. You are a woman of remarkable depth and genuine spirit. Will you do me the immense honor of becoming my wife?" The gasps around the room were audible, followed by a stunned silence. Julian's face was a mask of disbelief, then dawning horror, a slow realization of the magnitude of his folly. Lady Thorne let out a strangled cry, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Camille, for once, was utterly speechless, her audacious smile wiped clean, replaced by a gaping, disbelieving expression. The tables had turned, irrevocably and spectacularly. I looked at Alaric, at the sincerity in his intense gaze, at the genuine affection reflected in his eyes. This was not about convenience, or image, or suitability. This was about me, Eleanor, the woman I had only recently rediscovered, being seen and valued for my authentic self. His proposal wasn't a rescue, but a recognition. A profound sense of vindication, sweet and unexpected, washed over me, a warmth spreading through my chest, obliterating the last vestiges of past humiliation. The man who had called me dull, who had discarded me for his cousin, now watched as his powerful boss, the head of his own company, knelt before me, offering me a future I could only have dreamed of, a future brimming with potential and respect. A slow, radiant smile spread across my face, a genuine smile that reached my eyes and filled them with a light I hadn't known they possessed. "Yes, Lord Vance," I said, my voice clear and steady, resonant with newfound confidence. "I will." The aftermath was pure chaos, a delicious unraveling of the Thorne family's carefully constructed facade. Julian, mortified and publicly humiliated by his own boss, found himself stripped of his heir-apparent status, relegated to a minor, distant branch of the Thorne Group's operations, a corporate exile. The scandal of his affair with Camille, now magnified by Alaric's dramatic proposal, exploded across society pages, turning them into pariahs, their names synonymous with disgrace. Camille, once the vivacious star, found herself ostracized, her audacious charm suddenly viewed as brazen and inappropriate, her laughter now hollow and forced. My own family, initially bewildered by my sudden engagement to Lord Vance, quickly shifted from concern to bewildered pride, realizing the magnitude of my triumph. My mother, who had always worried about my quiet nature, now looked at me with a newfound respect, as if I had orchestrated the entire dramatic turn of events with a master strategist's hand. Which, in a way, I had, simply by choosing to be myself, by refusing to play the victim. The transition into my new life as Alaric Vance's fiancé was a whirlwind, but a profoundly joyful one. Alaric was everything he had appeared to be, and more. He was patient, kind, endlessly fascinating, and perhaps most importantly, he saw me. He encouraged my interests, celebrated my quirks, and listened to my thoughts with an attentiveness that was both flattering and deeply comforting. He treated me as an equal, a partner in every sense of the word, a true confidant. Our discussions ranged from global economics to ancient philosophy, from the intricacies of modern art to the simple beauty of a shared sunset on his sprawling rooftop terrace. He revealed a surprising passion for stargazing, and I found myself spending evenings identifying constellations, a profound sense of peace settling over me. I no longer felt the need to censor myself, to dim my light for fear of being too much. With Alaric, I was simply, wonderfully, myself, unburdened by expectations. The wedding planning was a grand affair, handled with Alaric's typical efficiency and understated elegance. I found myself making choices based on my own preferences, not Julian's or his parents' expectations. I chose a gown of delicate ivory silk, simple yet elegant, its subtle embroidery a nod to my love for forgotten artistry. The flowers were a symphony of deep greens and creamy whites, reflecting my newfound appreciation for the quiet beauty of nature. Every detail felt authentic, a true reflection of who I was becoming, a tangible manifestation of my liberated spirit. Dillian and Camille, now largely forgotten by society's elite, made a few pathetic attempts to regain their footing. Julian tried to approach me at a few public events, a desperate flicker of regret in his eyes, perhaps realizing the depth of what he had lost, the glittering future he had so casually discarded. I merely offered a polite, distant nod, my gaze cool and unyielding, a silent closure to a chapter I had long since moved past. Camille, in a particularly brazen move, even attempted to directly confront me, accusing me of stealing her thunder. I simply smiled, a genuine, serene smile. Camille, I had said, my voice calm, no one can steal what was never truly yours. Her face had flushed crimson, and she had retreated, defeated, her defiance crumbling. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, bathed in a soft golden light. My heart swelled with a profound sense of gratitude and joy. Standing at the altar, looking into Alaric's warm, intense eyes, I felt a completion I had never thought possible, a sense of belonging that resonated deep within my soul. His hand, warm and strong, enveloped mine. The sapphire on my finger, a deep celestial blue, seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, a symbol of our unbreakable bond. As we exchanged vows, my voice, which had once been so timid, rang clear and strong, filled with confidence and conviction. I was not the dull Eleanor Vale anymore. I was Eleanor Vance, a woman reborn, standing tall, embracing her true self, and marrying a man who saw her worth not in her quiet compliance, but in her authentic spirit. The reception was a joyous celebration, a gathering of genuine well-wishers, and those who had come to genuinely appreciate my journey. I danced with Alaric, my heart overflowing with happiness, feeling truly alive for the first time, every movement a testament to my liberation. The hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft strains of classical music, all blended into a symphony of contentment, a harmonious backdrop to my new life. Later that evening, as the stars began to pepper the darkening sky, Alaric led me to a quiet quarter of the ballroom, away from the dancing and chatter. He looked at me, his gaze tender, profound, filled with an unspoken depth of affection. "Eleanor," he began, his voice soft, "you have brought such light into my life. I never knew what I was missing until you arrived." I smiled, leaning into his touch. "And you, Alaric, you showed me the light within myself." He chuckled softly, a warm, resonant sound. "You were never dull, Eleanor. You were simply understated. And that I found to be a far more compelling quality than any manufactured vivacity." His words were a final, gentle balm to the old wounds, dissolving the last vestiges of self-doubt. The ghost of Julian's dismissive pronouncement finally, truly, dissipated, replaced by the warmth of Alaric's genuine affection, a complete and utter spiritual healing. My past life, with its humiliation and pain, was now nothing more than a faded memory, a cautionary tale that had ultimately led me to a far more fulfilling present. My journey had been one of self-discovery, fueled by a painful revelation and empowered by a second chance. I had learned that true worth came not from external validation, but from embracing one's authentic self. I had let Julian chase his fleeting desires, and in doing so, I had found a love that was real, profound, and utterly unconditional. The woman who was once too boring for a shallow man had been reborn, not into a life of revenge, but into a life of genuine happiness and self-acceptance, a life richer and more vibrant than any I could have imagined. And as Aloric's hand found mine, entwining our fingers, I knew this was just the beginning of our extraordinary story, a testament to the unforeseen paths that lead to true happiness. The initial 2 years of my marriage to Alaric were a tapestry woven with threads of profound happiness and quiet fulfillment. Our life together was an education, a constant unraveling of the woman I was meant to be, rather than the one I had tried to force myself into becoming. Alaric, with his keen intellect and perceptive nature, nurtured aspects of my personality I had long suppressed. My love for historical botany, once a private indulgence, became a shared pursuit, leading to explorations of ancient texts and even commissioned expeditions to remote regions for rare specimens. My sketching, once a solitary hobby, evolved into a serious artistic endeavor, leading to a small but well-received exhibition. With Alaric, I didn't just grow, I blossomed, truly embodying the vibrancy I had once desperately tried to fake. He often observed me, a thoughtful smile playing on his lips. "You're truly coming into your own, Eleanor," he would say, his eyes warm with genuine admiration. "It's a privilege to witness." His words were like gentle rain on parched earth, nourishing the parts of me that had been starved for so long, fostering a deep sense of security and self-worth. Meanwhile, the Thorn Group, under Alaric's astute leadership, continued to expand and diversify, solidifying its position as a global powerhouse. His vision for innovation and sustainability propelled the company into new, ethical markets, a sharp contrast to the traditional, sometimes ruthless, strategies of previous generations. My role in this was becoming increasingly significant. My involvement in the Environmental Research Institute had given me a deep understanding of sustainable practices, and Alaric frequently sought my input on new ventures, valuing my perspective not just as his wife, but as a competent and insightful professional. Julian and Camille, after their public humiliation and Julian's demotion, had retreated further from society. Rumors trickled back, painting a grim picture. Julian, unable to cope with his diminished status, had reportedly fallen into a spiral of bitterness and self-pity, often indulging in excessive drinking. His once perfectly groomed appearance had given way to a perpetual disarray, mirroring the chaos of his inner world. Camille, tied to his increasingly erratic behavior, was said to be growing resentful, her vivacity curdling into a sharp-edged cynicism. Their passion, it seemed, had been a superficial blaze, quickly extinguished by the cold winds of reality and the stark absence of external validation. The irony was not lost on me, though I felt no malice, only a detached sense of relief that I had escaped that bleak future. A new challenge began to emerge, not from the external machinations of Julian's family, but from within the intricate web of corporate power. Certain long-standing executives within the Thorn Group, veterans who had served under Lord Thorn, viewed Alaric's progressive strategies with suspicion. They were traditionalists, deeply entrenched in the old ways of doing business, believing that the Thorn Group's historical success lay solely in its rigid adherence to established norms. They saw my increasing influence, a woman from a minor family with unconventional ideas, as a direct threat to their established order and the stability of the company. Whispers of my inexperience and unconventional ideas began to circulate in the executive suites, carefully placed seeds of doubt intended to undermine my credibility and, by extension, Alaric's visionary leadership. "They're resisting change, Eleanor," Alaric explained one evening, looking over some internal reports, his brow furrowed with mild irritation. "They believe the old methods are infallible, that our family name alone guarantees success. They fail to see that true power lies in adaptability, in foresight, not in blind tradition." I nodded, my mind already formulating counter-strategies. "Their fear of obsolescence is making them reckless. They're mistaking comfort for security. We need to demonstrate that our new approach is not just ethically sound, but also undeniably profitable, a pathway to C&A. Even greater prosperity." The opportunity arose with a major new investment proposal, a multi-billion-dollar project in renewable energy. It was a bold move, requiring significant capital and a departure from the Thorn Group's traditional fossil fuel ventures. The traditionalists on the board saw it as an unnecessary risk, a dilution of their core business, a dangerous gamble. They were prepared to fight it with every ounce of their considerable influence. Alaric, with his characteristic calm and strategic brilliance, decided that I would present the core financial projections and long-term viability of the renewable energy project to the board. It was a deliberate move, placing me, the outsider with the unconventional ideas, directly in the line of fire, but also demonstrating his unwavering faith in my capabilities, a public endorsement of my growing authority. I spent weeks meticulously preparing, immersing myself in complex financial models, market analysis, and risk assessments. I wasn't just presenting data, I was presenting a vision, a future, meticulously built on tangible projections and irrefutable facts. My mind, sharp and analytical, thrived on the challenge, finding exhilaration in mastering the intricacies of global markets. The old Eleanor, who had once struggled to feign interest in corporate jargon, now genuinely understood and articulated its complexities, effortlessly translating complex financial data into a compelling data narrative. The day of the board meeting arrived, charged with a palpable tension that hummed in the air. The old guard, led by a formidable, silver-haired executive named Mr. Davies, sat around the polished mahogany table, their expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility, their faces setted grim lines. Julian's parents, Lord and Lady Thorn, were also present, observing from the sidelines, their faces carefully neutral. Though I sensed a subtle apprehension from Lady Thorn, perhaps recalling my previous unexpected success and the unpredictable nature of my presence. I began my presentation, my voice clear and confident, devoid of any nervous tremor, projecting an aura of quiet authority. I presented the financial models with precision, the market analysis with undeniable logic, and the long-term projections with a compelling vision of a sustainable and profitable future. I anticipated their questions, addressing potential concerns and debunking common misconceptions before they were even voiced, demonstrating a thorough understanding of their potential objections. I spoke not just as an analyst, but as a passionate advocate for a sustainable future, weaving economic viability with environmental responsibility into a seamless, compelling narrative. Mr. Davies, predictably, launched the first volley, his voice dripping with condescension, an attempt to undermine my authority. "Lady Vance," he began, his tone dripping with dismissive politeness, "while your numbers are certainly optimistic, one must question the wisdom of diverting such significant capital from our proven assets into what is, essentially, an unproven venture. Furthermore, with all due respect, your background is not precisely in traditional corporate finance. Are we to entrust the future of the Thorn Group to such modern, shall we say, ideals?" The implication was clear. I was an outsider, lacking the proper lineage and experience to guide such a prestigious company. A ripple of murmurs went through the audience. It was the familiar tactic: question my credentials, highlight my outsider status, undermine my expertise, trying to box me into their preconceived notions. I met his gaze, my expression calm and unwavering, a silent challenge. "Mr. Davies," I replied, my voice steady, unhurried. But Thorn Group's legacy is built on anticipating market shifts, not clinging to outdated models. The proven assets you speak of are rapidly becoming obsolete, their profitability diminishing as global priorities shift. The future of energy is not in finite resources, but in sustainable innovation, in harnessing the inexhaustible power of nature. My ideals, as you call them, are rooted in sound economic principles and a clear understanding of global trends that dictate future growth. To ignore them would be not just a risk, but a direct threat to the very legacy you purport to protect, leading us to irrelevance. I then presented a detailed case study of a competitor who had been slow to adapt to renewable energy trends and was now facing significant financial decline. A stark warning. I contrasted it with a smaller, more agile company that had embraced renewable energy and seen exponential growth, illustrating the undeniable success of the new paradigm. My arguments were rubbly, irrefutable, and backed by solid data and compelling projections, leaving no room for counter-argument. Alaric, sitting beside me, maintained a silent, almost imperceptible air of confidence, his presence a powerful endorsement. His quiet strength radiating support. His gaze was fixed on me, a silent reassurance that fueled my resolve, a shared understanding passing between us. By the end of my presentation, the room was buzzing, but this time, not like doubt, but with grudging admiration and a growing sense of conviction. The traditionalists, though still wary, could not deny the logical force of my arguments, the sheer weight of the evidence I presented. Even Lord Thorn, known for his stoic demeanor, leaned forward, a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes, a sign of grudging respect. The vote was taken. The renewable energy project passed, not unanimously, but with a decisive majority. A clear victory for progress over tradition. It was a victory not just for the project, but for Alaric's vision, and for my undeniable place within the Thorn Group's leadership. I had earned my seat at that table, not through lineage, but through merit. The success of the renewable energy project solidified my position within the Thorn Group. The whispers about my inexperience faded, replaced by grudging respect, and eventually, genuine admiration from those who had initially resisted. I was no longer merely Alaric's wife, but a force in my own right, a crucial partner in shaping the company's future. My work gave me immense satisfaction, a profound sense of purpose that transcended any past desires for validation, a true alignment of my skills and my passions. As Alaric and I continued to build our life, our love deepened into an unwavering, profound connection. We were a true partnership, supporting each other's ambitions, sharing each other's burdens, and celebrating each other's triumphs. Our home became a sanctuary filled with intellectual curiosity, quiet laughter, and the subtle scent of blooming orchids from my expanding conservatory, a testament to the growth we shared. One quiet evening, as we sat by the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, Alaric reading a rare manuscript, and I sketching a new botanical specimen, he paused, looking at me over the rim of his spectacles. "Eleanor," he said, his voice soft, contemplative, "do you ever think about what might have been?" His gaze was gentle, understanding. I knew he was referring to Julian, to the life I had narrowly avoided, the alternative path I had consciously chosen to diverge from. I smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile, free of any lingering pain, only to be profoundly grateful for what is. My first life, my previous self, she was a quiet shadow, always striving to fit into a mold that wasn't hers, always seeking external validation. You, Alaric, you showed me that I didn't need a mold. You taught me to be myself, to embrace my own light, and in doing so, you gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams, a life truly worth living." He reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, a silent affirmation of our bond. "You had that strength within you all along, Eleanor. I merely provided the space for it to flourish, a safe harbor for your true spirit." The journey from dull fiancé to powerful partner had been arduous, marked by moments of doubt and quiet defiance. A complete metamorphosis of self, but every step had been worth it. Every challenge faced had only strengthened my resolve. I had been reborn, not just into a new timeline, but into a new self. I had let Belia, Julian, chase his superficial desires, leading him to his own self-inflicted downfall and irrelevance. And in doing so, I had found a love that was real, a purpose that was profound, and a life that was vibrantly, authentically mine. A masterpiece of my own design. The woman who was once too boring had become a woman who was truly extraordinary, not by changing for another, but by daring to be utterly, uncompromisingly herself. And as I looked at Alaric, his eyes mirroring the warm glow of the fire, I knew our story was only just beginning, a testament to the unforeseen paths that lead to true happiness, a legacy built not on ancient names, but on genuine connection and unwavering love.